Hello, and I'm here with Lily Seto. Lily, I met you 6 years ago, I think now, in Fort Lauderdale. We'd been invited out for an ICF job analysis panel way back at the beginning of the thinking around the new competency framework. We've kept in touch since. And
Yes.
I remember a bit of a heated debate going on there about supervision, about you, Sharon Jansen and I were their supervisors, and there was a bit of a why should I have to have supervision conversation going on, and a feeling of not distrust is the wrong word, but people weren't really, the general sense was it was not being embraced at that time, with many of the coaches present. Lily, tell us a little bit about your journey to supervision and your background so people can get a sense of you.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me, first of all, Mariana. I'm really hoping that this becomes a very interactive conversation.
That would be
And
great.
so I recall it was about 10 years ago, and I was running an internal coaching supervision program, and we had 16 full-time coaches. And we did a lot of mentor coaching with this group. And what became apparent was there needed to be something more than just the mentor coaching. There was people were getting in their own way, and there was a lot of, because it was an internal group, there were some potential ethical uh, conversations that needed to happen. And some of this could be done in mentor coaching. The saboteurs were showing up. And so I went looking and I discovered coaching supervision. And at that time, we probably had about 4 supervisors in North America. And I discovered it was quite common in Europe, and especially in the UK. And so we brought supervision into the group, and I fell in love with supervision because it's a space where I can just say anything I want, and I can reflect and have a trusted partner just to work through some dilemmas that are going on in my mind.
I love that because I think people have a misconception perhaps that supervision is all about, I think it's the word, supervision is about control, it's about judgment. And perhaps we could start by unpacking a bit about what is supervision.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm asked that all the time. And there is this thought that if you come from the corporate world, a supervisor is someone that looks over your work and tells you what you did wrong and corrects you. Whereas in coaching supervision, it's unfortunate that that's the word that is kind of sticking around right now. I'd like to call it reflective space or reflective
Yeah.
practice myself, because it's really about what do I need to think through with somebody on my own terms that will help me support my clients and the larger system more.
Yeah.
And the question I am often asked too is, what's the difference between coaching, mentor coaching, and coaching supervision? I'll try to make this work, but these are all closed social constructs, right? And I
I'll
think
chip
there's
in
a
my viewpoint.
great, thank you. There's a huge overlap too. So coaching really is to hold space for someone to figure out what they want to do, what their goals are, and how to get there.
Mm.
Um, in its simplest form, mentor coaching is an ICF concept of how do we demonstrate the core competencies. So really focused on the core competencies, which I love the updated ones. They're quite
Mm.
inclusive. And so that's how we do it. And supervision is really about who we are being as a coach. So what's getting
Yeah.
in our way? What's our stuff that we're bringing into the system that we're not aware of? And really examining some unconscious bias that we might be bringing into the space. What do you think?
Yeah. Yes. There's that. There's yeah who we are. There's a bit about the mindset that we're bringing, which is again in the new competencies. Um, I think that I'm not sure, and you will know, you'll probably understand remember the theory better than me, but there's that triangle about the developmental area of supervision, which can include a bit of crossover with mentoring. There's the managerial, which can be keeping an eye on the ethics piece, perhaps, and the supportive role. In the comments, we've just had somebody's just reminded me of the comment that you made, which was that it's a spa for your coaching mind. And I love
Yes.
that supportive element. Lily, if I may share an anecdote, I was working with you as my supervisor, I was part of a group that you were running at the beginning of the pandemic. And I certainly felt that supportive role at that moment in time, because it felt like a global trauma we were all going from. I'd been working with clients in India and felt it creeping, and suddenly my daughter's home from school, and it then was expanding around the world. And we were all, as coaches within that group, trying to hold space with our clients who were going through a similar process. It was a pandemic. And it was the one place that we could come together and share that at a professional level, a contracted for, confidential, safe space to be together.
I remember that session, and I remember how we all felt lonely in that space as individual coaches. And when we came together, we normalized what we were feeling. And we also reflected that we were reflecting the system as well. Our clients were feeling that way. The world at large was feeling that way. And so being able to just, it's like my coaching mind going to the spa. Right. Okay. Yes.
We have got some people listening in and commenting. So please do ask, what is the courageous question that you want to bring today? And we will see where we can go with that. Sharon is online watching us, and I know I said to you I wasn't going to share names.
I'm sure Sharon's
Sharon
fine.
was part of a beautiful conversation, and in Fort Lauderdale, standing up as supervisors against this kind of
resistance. I think it was
resistance is the word,
or misunderstanding, or
I wanted to move us then to think about, why is it important for us as coaches to be in supervision? I think for me, it's because it makes me become a better coach. I'm a supervisor as well, and both being a supervisor and being in supervision helps me coach courageously. It improves my coaching. Why is it important, Lily, do you think?
Well, for me, to me, it's an ethical imperative. So I do a lot of journaling. I do a lot of reflective walks. And then I still have some what I call niggly stuff going on in my mind about, I'm not sure if I did that right. And I wonder why I'm feeling this way about a client. And I need someone who's trained to support me in thinking through these pieces. So I can go, I get it now. I get it. Without telling me what to do, because I'm an adult and I have a really rebellious child in me that says, don't tell me what to do, but support me in thinking it through. Ooh, that rhymes. Don't tell me what to do. Support me in thinking it through. I feel a song coming on.
You're reminding me of the nice side of supervision, but it is actually fun. Do you know what I mean?
Can be fun. I hope it's fun. I don't want to go anywhere where there's no fun. I can tell you that. Sometimes it gets heavy and because of the topic, but we can bring some levity into that as well. Always.
I think that's a myth that some people have around supervision. It's a bit nasal, gazy, and a bit dour, and a bit retrospective, and a bit, but actually there tends to be a way to analyze and have levity and shift things around a bit. We've had a question about, where do supervisors go for supervision?
Oh, that's great. Well, I work with 3 supervisors myself, specifically chosen. One is often about supervision of supervision. So I get stuck in one of my supervision sessions. I've got a supervisor that I trust 100%. I can say anything to her. I can be vulnerable. I can put all the cards on the table without having to worry that she's going to judge me. And that's a great space to be in.
I have in the past worked with a supervisor that worked with me as a supervisor of my coaching, my supervision, and my mentoring, because I do all 3. I tend to work with different supervisors at different periods. I've worked with you, I've worked with other people watching. I've been part of a program in Ireland as a supervisor, and the supervisors had a supervision as the part of the program. And I'm presuming the supervisor of the supervisors was within their own supervision as well. So supervisors also go to supervision. I think that's the
Absolutely. Well,
succinct
we know the
answer.
value of it too.
Yeah, and I like it. I'm I've fallen in love with the sharpening the saw phrase, and it's for me working with different supervisors is a way that I do that, because I'm trying to collect ideas and use different approaches and research and get improve my supervision as well.
Yeah, I tend to rotate supervisors every 2 or 3 years as well,
Mm.
just to try things out. I have one that I continually go to, but the other ones I rotate. I've gone into group supervision to try different supervisors. And then also 1 year I focused on TA,
Yeah,
transactional analysis, for a whole year with a supervisor specializing in that area. So just kind of what's drawing me, what's the
yeah,
energy about, where do I feel my next learning edge is? Right now I'm focusing on cultural diversity. I've had someone ask me about starting a group for Black, Indigenous, people of color to just be together and talk about what's the experience of being an Asian Canadian woman supervisor coach. I
mm.
took one session to my supervisor where I was going into a corporate boardroom of 6 white male 60-year-olds, and I'm thinking, huh, I just want to think this through. And it came out great at the end, but I was like, ooh, that was a new one for me. It was probably about, I don't know, 8 years ago. And it was like, usually I get to pick my clients. Usually, I choose who I work with. And this is like a request to go in and do this. And how do I feel about that?
Mm.
What are they going to see when they see this Asian woman coming in to a corporate boardroom of a male dominated industry? How do I need to be in that space? So that was actually one of the most powerful sessions that I had around deference and, owning my space in that type of a setting.
Yeah, it's reminded me about the new competency framework as well, where culture and context is really much coming through it now. I'm moving on, and please comment away and add. We can continue the conversation after we've finished live here. But how best to prepare for supervision, Lily?
Wow, that's such a big question. So first of all, I'm choosing my supervisor. I interview people for supervision, and some of the questions I ask is, where do you go for supervision? What's your style? Where were you trained? There's a number of people out there they have shingles up that they're not even qualified as a supervisor, and I'm a little bit leery about that. I have a
Mm.
bias to somebody who's been trained. I'm not saying that they're not good, but my bias is to be trained.
I was explaining in a conversation earlier today that my supervision training was as in depth and robust and long as my coach training.
Yes, and maybe
It's
more
that.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a special skill set, especially with the psychodynamics. I don't want anyone messing with my mind if they haven't been had some training in that area.
Mm.
And I love lots of space. There are some supervisors that are more didactic. They have more questions. It feels like I'm being peppered. That's not my reflective space. So
Mm.
I really choose my supervisors carefully. And then in preparation, I'm thinking about, what am I going to take to supervision? Which client is giving, when I see her name pop up on my schedule, I go, oh no, right? And I get a sinking feeling. Do you ever get that?
Never, never. No,
Never.
never had that
Oh.
feeling.
Or I say, yippee, I get to work with him or her today. What a
Yeah.
great day it's going to be. And it's like, oh, what's that all about? So,
Mm.
who am I going to collude with in all of this? You don't
Yeah.
collude either, right?
Never.
I know. I know you. And sometimes as I'm working with my clients, either coaches or coaching clients, I'm making some notes. I have a little notebook that, things to take to supervision. So I have a little list going. And if I can't work it through in one of my reflective walks or journaling, it's like, okay, I think this is the one. Or who's the one that I don't want to take to supervision? What about you? How do you prepare?
Yeah. It's normally, if I notice the voice, the mulling over, the uneasy feeling. Um, I think when people are coming to supervision with me and I notice that they're never bringing anything, then I'm thinking, am I working at just the transactional, the stuff of coaching too much? And I think it's a question in itself. If you have people that never have anything that they think they want to bring, is it something about the process that's not quite fitting right, or what is it? There's a question that needs to be answered. I think if people never have anything to bring, I think there's a wondering in that, and that needs to be addressed in itself. But that client list thing, yeah, the what is that sense of, oh, I'm not sure, or that you can walk away from a coaching session sometimes and you think that, yes, we went deep there. That sometimes you feel there's a feeling that you haven't quite got to the real issue. There's something going on that's not quite sitting right. There's something beneath what you said, and that you are allowing the coaching to just skit along on the surface without actually going deeper. That kind of stuff that I'm looking at to bring. Can I just interrupt our flow for a second, because we've had an interesting question about supervision groups and any risks of long-term intact groups, would you say?
Oh, that's a great question. I think about that all the time. I think the longest group I have has had 3 years in a row. And so there's some potential of becoming too friendly and starting to collude with each other and become friends versus being rigorous in terms of the supervision discipline. On the flip side, you can get the rapport that is required to go deep.
Yeah.
So I love it when there's one group that there's no holds barred. They can talk about anything and not feel like they are going to be judged, or feel they can feel the hit of shame, but they feel safe enough in this group to be able to say whatever they need to say. And that is amazing learning space. Amazing learning space. So I think it's about contracting. I think it's about how that space is held and the agreements that we have of how we're going to work in that space. Because I know that we all have intersecting roles with other people. It's really hard to just work with one person cleanly, right? And not have other roles with them in different venues. Yeah.
And I'm thinking this is where the supervision of the supervisors comes in, because that noticing, hold on, are we colluding with one another here? Has our depth of rapport stepped over a boundary? Are we still working effectively with one another? I think that's where those questions can be taken.
Yeah, those are great questions. Absolutely.
I'm hoping that we've answered the question. We've talked about that, what if you don't have anything to bring piece, but we talked a bit about how to maximize the experience, and that's the real theme today about choosing a supervisor. You said about training. There's something for me about people that are too theoretical. It doesn't sit with me. I don't, I like some people bringing models in and that kind of stuff, but that's not for me in terms of supervision. Somehow I want people to be actually coaching as well. I think anybody I want them to be working in that area and experienced as a coach and then become a supervisor. Something I don't think it's necessarily right for really new coaches to then want to step into the supervision world. And actually that's exactly what I did, by the way. I did my supervision the year after I did my ACC. I think I was hot off the press, and I think it's only now really that I've grown into a supervision role. I think 10 years later. So but that's possibly a learning in hindsight. Anything else that we can do to maximize our supervision experience, do you think?
Well, I think there's a piece around our own reflection work, so it's not just in supervision groups. So after my supervision group or my supervision session, I tend to go for a long walk and think about, what did I learn? How does this improve my coaching? Where can I apply it? Yeah, so just being mindful of the learning space, and then what do we do with it? It's the so what, now what?
Yes.
Which doesn't always get covered in the supervision conversation, because the supervision position is the reflective space. And then
Yeah.
I, as a coach, supervisor, need to decide, how am I going to use this? So it gives me a lot of autonomy, a lot of agency to figure out what I need to do to improve my coaching or supervision.
There's something about supervision, the maximizing the experience to help one embody a coaching mindset as well. I think we start to do the work ourselves. And I shared the story in that conversation about courageous coaching, which was, I noticed myself, I'll repeat again in case people didn't hear it, but working with a client, giving feedback on a 360. The feedback on the 360 was the person gets defensive to the point of aggressive, and giving this feedback, asking, what they felt when they read it. I noticed the client getting defensive to the point of aggressive with me, and having the internal conversation. Can't wait to take this to supervision. And then no, I'm a coach. I need to name this now.
Nice,
because then
nice.
I think I got into when I take it to supervision, what's my supervisor going to say part of the conversation, which was, and I could actually
just fast forward.
Yes. And I'm a supervisor. And I went through the whole process within that couple of minutes in my head and named it. And it was, the sky didn't fall in. There was a lot of learning in the process. And yeah, but I think that
nice.
Supervision maximizes your ability to do that stuff yourself. You can start to analyze your own work. You know.
It's that reflection in action, in the
Yeah.
moment. What's going on? What do I need to look after? So being in supervision sort of trains us to be able to access our internal supervisor.
And actually the conversation included do you know what? And I noticed a hesitancy with broaching this with you.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful.
There's a lot in it.
I'd love to have been a fly on that wall. And the other thing about supervision is I love that it's messy and emergent. And we're working with what's going on in the moment. So when you said, I'm noticing my hesitancy, it's like, okay, what's that all about for me? What's that all about for us? And is that reflected in the larger system that we're working in as well? Because often we're bringing that energy into the space.
I've just thought of something which we hadn't talked about before, but might be useful here, which is parallel process, Lily.
Did you want to introduce
it?
No,
I was hoping you could.
Okay. Oh, okay. It's a hard concept to explain, but once you get it, it's a beautiful thing to see, and you can't help but see it.
I think I kind of illustrated it a little bit with the noticing myself in the moment, repeat the don't want to confront or talk about this because the guy's going to get defensive and aggressive, and stopping myself and noticing it. So
yeah. We're such good storytellers, aren't we? We tell ourselves about, he's going to get angry and all sorts of things. And so one of the questions if I get this intuitive hit, I might ask my supervision client, what's happening between you and me that might be mirrored in the system with you and your client, or something like that, not necessarily that kind of language. Or I might say, I feel my heart thumping right now. And I don't know if that has anything to do with what we're talking about. And the client, the supervisee, might go, oh yeah, my heart's thumping too. And I think it's because I have this fear about having this conversation with my client, and he's having the fear about having the conversation with his boss. So there's a parallel that's going on, right? I don't know if I'm having fear, but that intuitive hit about what's going on in our body somatically might be useful information to look at, because we're working in the emergent and in the what's happening right now. And often that mirrors the larger system. So I work with team coaches sometimes, and if they're in a pair, whatever's going on for those two, it's probably happening in the team and in the larger organization, because somehow we bring that energy with us. So we call that a parallel process. If something's happening between myself as a supervisor and the supervisee or the client or participant, it's likely happening somewhere else as well. So it's something to look at as well. This is all data, right? Anything that's going on is data. Your hesitancy that you named is data.
Yeah.
So we hold this information lightly and say, does this mean anything? Does it trigger anything in us? And does it take us to places? Is there any transference going on? One of the biggest ones in supervision is around, also, just to shift a little bit, is some transference that might happen. So sometimes I get this intuition about something, and I'll say, does this person remind you of anyone?
Yeah.
I had someone go, yeah, my daughter. Yes, that's why I'm so stuck on her making this decision. It's like, okay, now you know. What do you want to do? And it's like, oh, she's not my daughter. I can let it
Mm.
go now, right? So we get these unconscious stuff that's going on for us that gets in our way as a coach.
Yeah. And stuff that gets in our way as a coach is something that sometimes we don't even notice for ourselves, I think. Sometimes
No.
we're almost immune to it. And that's why working with somebody else that knows that sphere and doesn't just keep in mind, we talk as supervisors about the seven-eyed model, for example. So it's not just keeping in mind our interactions with our clients, it's broader than that.
Yes. Go ahead.
You've got you've got them down pat. You go on about six-eyed, whatever, right? But it's beyond us and our clients. It's our clients, the organization within which they work, their families, the context within which the organization is placed, and the system. It's
Yes.
broad.
The
And as a
cultural
supervisor,
context.
we're keeping a check on all of
Yes.
those different contexts.
And the
And
ecology
our
now as
interaction
well.
with the coach, as well.
Yes. There's a lot of pieces that we can go exploring in.
There are.
Yeah. It's really, there can be a discipline, and there can also be a very emergent nature to the supervision session. Yeah. So I never know what's going to happen in a session, which I love. I don't have a model that I'm going to take necessarily. It's this, what's happening now, and where does the client, the supervisee, the client want to go with this reflection? Where do they want to probe around, or where don't they want to probe around?
We've had a question that's just come through. I think we may have answered it earlier, but just to tap into it a little bit. New to supervision and a bit confused about the difference between coaching and supervision. Understand the coach self-care side. Wonders if supervision is a sort of focused psychotherapy of the coaches based on challenges encountered in their practice.
That's a great question. Well, this is the piece that I love the most, is like psychodynamics. What's going on? So I have a bias to this, I guess. What's going on that's unconscious to us, and who we're being as a coach, and where does it come from? But not to go into therapy, because as soon as we uncover where it comes from, then let's come back to the here and now and say, what do you want to do with that piece of information that you've discovered? Oh yes, she reminds me of your daughter. Or okay, that's the then and there, and now let's talk about, how does that impact you with your client?
What needs to happen next?
What do you want to do next? What do you want to do about that information? And sometimes, if it seems pretty profound, I might say, okay, well, tell me 3 ways that she reminds you of your daughter, and what 3 ways doesn't she remind you of your daughter, so that's different, so that we can see there is a distinguishing difference. And now I can see my client as a whole capable person in front of me, rather than projecting or transferring some of my daughter's distinguishing features onto this person. And it happened to me probably about 10 years ago. I noticed that there were a number of Asian women coming to see me, probably in their 30s and 40s. And I was wondering about this. So I took it to my supervisor, and one of my questions was, I'm wondering what kind of energy I'm projecting out there in the world, that I see there's 4 or 5 of my supervisees or my coaching clients that are Asian, 35, which is kind of the same age as my 2 sons. I don't have any daughters, but it was, it's something about, what's going on for my 2 sons that is kind of getting in the way of me being what I call squeaky clean with my clients. And as soon as I was able to uncover that, it was like, okay, I can just be in this space, They are my coaching client. They are not my sons. They're not a projected daughter or a wanted to be daughter, and just be with them. And it just shifted things. And then they stopped coming to me. I have a couple, but so I don't know. Maybe it was something I had to work through unconsciously, um, about children. So, but it was so useful to have had that coaching supervision session.
Lily, I'm coming to the end of our time today. It feels like we're just getting into the juicy stuff of our conversation. We can continue online in the comments, but is there anything that we need to say to wrap things up, do you think?
Well, if you haven't experienced supervision, I would encourage you to have an experience of it and decide for yourself whether it's the kind of reflective practice that is suitable for you. Because it probably is not suitable for everybody. But I think once you've experienced it, you will fall in love with supervision.
Yeah.
At least I hope so, because that's what happened to me.
Spa
The
for your coaching life.
spa.
Yeah,
Yes.
the spa. Thank you so much, Lily, for your time today. And goodbye.
It's been delightful.
I'm going to stop the recording now.